All right, so for this deep dive, you guys sent in How to Suck Him by Josh.
Oh, wow.
And
That's a very
this guy definitely has,
direct title.
yeah, it's very direct, isn't it?
Yeah.
And we're going to unpack it all.
Oh.
We'll get into the nitty-gritty of Josh's advice.
Right.
But we'll also try to zoom out and look at the bigger picture.
Yeah.
Like what makes men tick in this particular arena, you know, how relationships factor in,
Yeah.
and what it all means for a satisfying sex life for everybody involved.
I think that's a great approach because while this guide, as you mentioned, is very direct, it's very much geared toward pleasing the man.
Right.
So I think it's important to bring in some additional perspectives.
Yeah, absolutely.
To make sure that we're giving you a balanced view.
For sure.
Because
Totally.
let's face it,
Yeah,
a fulfilling experience involves both partners.
absolutely.
Right.
So let's just jump right in.
Okay.
Josh calls this first section the male perspective. And he's pretty upfront about why men enjoy fellatio.
Okay.
And he focuses mainly on the intense physical pleasure.
Okay.
You might already know about the thousands of nerve endings
Yeah.
and heightened sensitivity down there.
Right.
But
He's not wrong about that.
yeah,
The glans penis, the head of the penis, is particularly sensitive.
right.
But to understand why this specific kind of stimulation is so pleasurable for men,
Yeah.
we need to go a bit deeper than just the anatomy.
Okay, so what's the deeper story here?
Well, some researchers believe it's tied to our evolutionary history.
Okay.
So the direct stimulation of the glands during fellatio mimics the sensations experienced during intercourse, which, from an evolutionary perspective, is all about procreation.
So it's like a biological shortcut to those good feelings
Right.
that ensure the survival of the species.
Exactly.
Wow, fascinating.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing there's more to it than just ancient instincts.
Right.
Right.
Josh also touches on the psychological side, mentioning the ego boost men get from fellatio. He even uses the word dominance a few times, which is interesting.
Dominance, huh?
Yeah,
That's a loaded word.
it is.
What do you think he's really getting at there?
It's tricky because dominance can have different meanings in different contexts.
Right.
In this case, I think Josh is referring to the feeling of being desired
Okay.
and having one's sexual prowess acknowledged.
Okay.
It ties into societal expectations of masculinity,
Okay.
where men are often taught to be the initiators and performers in sexual encounters.
So it's less about actual control and more about
Yes,
feeling validated and desired.
exactly. And this validation can be very powerful.
Yeah.
It reinforces a man's sense of masculinity
Okay.
and can boost his self-esteem.
Okay.
Now, this isn't to say that all men seek dominance in this way,
Right.
or that women don't also crave validation,
Yeah.
but it's a factor that Josh highlights,
Right.
and it's worth considering.
Okay, so we've got the evolutionary drive, we've got the societal expectations, and the psychological boost all playing into this.
Absolutely.
So it's more complex than just men like it because it feels good.
Yeah, there are layers to unpack here.
Right.
And understanding those layers can help both partners approach the experience with more awareness and empathy.
Okay, so we've laid the groundwork for why men enjoy fellatio.
Right. Yeah.
Now let's get into the how Josh dedicates a whole section to techniques.
Right.
And some of his suggestions are, well, let's just say they're memorable.
Yes. The whipped cream and car suggestions definitely caught my eye.
Yeah, those were interesting.
Yeah.
But before we go there,
Yeah.
let's address the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
Safety and hygiene.
Absolutely. It's crucial to prioritize safety and hygiene during any sexual activity.
Yeah,
And fellatio is no exception.
right.
You may already know about the importance of open communication about sexual history and regular STD testing,
Right.
but it bears repeating.
Yeah, for sure. And of course, consent is non-negotiable.
Absolutely.
Everyone involved needs to be enthusiastic and comfortable with what's happening.
Right. And that applies to all aspects of the experience,
Yeah.
from choosing which techniques to try to setting boundaries and limits.
Okay, so safety, hygiene, consent.
Check, check, check.
Check, check, check.
Yes.
Now, can we talk about those whipped cream and car scenarios?
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm honestly not sure what to make of them.
Well, I think it's important to approach those suggestions with a critical eye.
Okay.
Whipped cream, for example, can be fun for some couples,
Yeah.
but could also lead to yeast infections or other complications if proper hygiene isn't observed.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
What about the car thing? Is that even safe or legal in most places?
That's where context and common sense come into play.
Right.
Spontaneity can be great, but not at the expense of safety or legality.
Right.
It's also important to consider whether both partners are truly comfortable with the idea,
Yeah.
or if one person is feeling pressured or coerced.
Right, so maybe let's leave the car parked for now.
Okay.
and focus on creating a safe and enjoyable experience in a more, shall we say, controlled environment.
I think that's a wise decision.
Yeah.
There are plenty of ways to spice things up without putting yourselves at risk.
Okay, good. So back to Josh's techniques.
Right.
He seems to be a big believer in variety,
Okay.
suggesting everything from gentle licking to, well, let's just say more intense approaches.
And variety can definitely be a good thing.
Yeah.
It's about exploring different sensations, rhythms, and pressures to find what works best for both partners.
Right. And it's about communication, right?
Yeah.
Making sure both partners are enjoying themselves and feel comfortable expressing their preferences.
Absolutely. Checking in with each other, both verbally and non-verbally, is crucial.
Right.
It's about being attuned to your partner's responses and adjusting your technique accordingly.
Okay, so communication is key, but where does female pleasure fit into all of this?
That's an important point.
Because Josh's guide is very much focused on the male experience.
We'll dive deeper into female pleasure and techniques for maximizing it in part 2 of this deep dive.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah.
We'll be right back after a short break.
All right, see you then. Welcome back. So, as promised, we're shifting gears now to explore the other side of the equation.
Right.
Female pleasure during fellatio.
Okay, because a truly satisfying experience is a two-way street, right?
Exactly.
And while Josh's guide was pretty silent on this aspect,
Yeah.
I want to make sure you're getting the full picture.
Right. We've established that men often find fellatio pleasurable
Yeah.
due to the direct stimulation of the glands.
Right.
But what about women?
Right.
You might be wondering, how can an act that doesn't directly involve the clitoris
Yeah.
be pleasurable for the giver?
It's a good question, and one that Josh seems to gloss over entirely.
He does.
So let's unpack it.
All right.
Anatomically speaking, what's happening for women during fellatio?
Well, while the clitoris isn't directly involved,
Right.
there's a complex network of nerves and tissues in the vulva and surrounding area.
That can be stimulated.
Okay.
It's more about indirect stimulation
Okay.
through the motion pressure and even sounds associated with fellatio.
Okay, so it's less about pinpoint accuracy and more about the overall sensory experience?
Precisely. And for some women, the act of giving pleasure to their partner can be inherently arousing.
Oh, okay.
It's like that whole giver versus receiver dynamic.
Okay.
Some people find joy in both roles.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing it's not a one-size-fits-all situation.
Absolutely not. Women's sexual responses are incredibly diverse.
Right.
What feels good for one woman may not work for another,
Okay.
and that's where self-exploration comes in.
Uh-huh.
Masturbation can be a powerful tool for understanding your body
Okay.
and what types of touch and stimulation feel good.
So knowing your own body is the first step.
Right.
Then how do you bring this up with your partner?
Yeah,
I imagine it can be a bit awkward to talk about.
it can be.
But open and honest communication is key to a fulfilling sexual relationship.
Okay.
It's about creating a safe and non-judgmental space where you can both talk about your desires and needs.
Yeah.
You can start by sharing what you've discovered through self-exploration,
Right.
and then brainstorm ways to incorporate those sensations into fellatio.
So ditch the shame and have an open conversation about what feels good.
Exactly.
I like it.
Yeah,
But what if the woman isn't into it at all?
right.
Is it okay to say no to fellatio?
Absolutely. Consent is paramount.
Okay.
No one should ever feel pressured to engage in any sexual activity they don't want to do.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah.
But what if you're willing to give fellatio, but want to make sure it's pleasurable for you too?
Okay.
How do you balance those desires?
It's about finding a compromise and being creative.
Okay.
Maybe it's about setting a time limit, taking breaks, or incorporating other activities that you both enjoy.
Okay.
It could also involve switching positions so the woman has more control over the angle and pressure.
So it's a collaborative process, not a one-sided performance.
Exactly. And that's where communication, experimentation, and a willingness to be open to new things come in.
Speaking of experimentation, Josh does get into some pretty specific techniques.
Yeah.
Should we dive into those?
We can, but it's important to remember that what works for one couple may not work for another.
Right.
These are just suggestions, not hard and fast rules.
Right. So let's take a look at some of his tips and see what we can learn.
Okay.
He mentioned using a mirror,
Yeah,
which I think is a pretty common suggestion.
it is.
Yeah.
And for good reason.
Yeah.
It adds a whole visual element
Right.
that can be stimulating for both partners.
Right.
It allows both partners to see the act from a different perspective,
Right.
which can heighten arousal and create a more intense experience.
Okay. What else does Josh suggest?
Oh,
I'm curious to see what other tricks he has up his sleeve.
he's a big proponent of variety.
Yeah.
He suggests incorporating different techniques, positions, and even settings to keep things exciting.
Oh, right. Remember that car scenario we talked about earlier?
Oh, yeah, the one we decided to steer clear of
Yeah.
for safety reasons.
For safety reasons.
Exactly. While spontaneity can be fun, it's not worth compromising safety or comfort.
Right.
But there are plenty of other ways to introduce variety.
But-
There's a whole world of techniques to explore, from gentle sucking and licking to more intense deep throating.
Okay.
It's about finding what feels good for both partners and experimenting with different rhythms and pressures.
And it's about communication, right?
Yes.
Making sure both partners are on the same page and enjoying themselves.
Absolutely. Checking in with each other both verbally and non-verbally is crucial.
Okay.
It's about being attuned to your partner's responses and adjusting your technique accordingly.
Okay, so communication is key. What else do we need to keep in mind when it comes to fellatio techniques?
Well, Josh emphasizes the importance of using your hands.
Okay.
He suggests incorporating hand stimulation along with oral sex for a more intense experience.
That makes sense.
Hmm.
It's like multitasking for pleasure.
Exactly. It can also help to vary the sensations and keep things interesting.
Okay.
He also talks about the use of lubrication,
Yeah,
which can make the experience more comfortable for both partners.
good point.
Yeah.
Sometimes things can get a little dry, especially if you're going for a longer session.
Right.
Lubricant can definitely help with that.
Absolutely. And it can also enhance the sensations for both partners.
So we've covered a lot of ground here, from the basics of anatomy and communication to some more advanced techniques.
We have.
But I think there's still one crucial aspect we haven't fully addressed yet.
I agree. We've talked about the mechanics of fellatio,
Right.
but what about the emotional and psychological side of things?
Right. Because it's not just about the physical act.
Hmm.
It's about intimacy, connection, and desire.
Yes.
And that's something Josh doesn't really touch on in his guide.
He doesn't, but it's a crucial part of the equation.
Yeah.
Fellatio can be an incredibly intimate and bonding experience
Okay.
when it's approached with love, respect, and a genuine desire to please your partner.
So how do we tap into that deeper level of connection?
It starts with setting the mood.
Okay.
Creating a romantic and sensual atmosphere can make a big difference.
Okay.
Things like candles, music massage, and even just taking the time to connect emotionally before engaging in sexual activity can enhance the experience.
It's about setting the stage for intimacy, both physical and emotional.
Exactly. And it's about being present in the moment,
Okay.
focusing on the sensations and letting go of any distractions or inhibitions.
It sounds like mindfulness plays a role here.
It absolutely does.
Okay.
Being mindful during fellatio can heighten the pleasure for both partners.
Okay.
It's about paying attention to the sensations, the tastes, the smells, and even the sounds.
Okay.
It's about being fully engaged in the experience.
So it's not just about the technique.
Right.
It's about bringing your full self to the experience, both physically and emotionally.
Precisely. And when both partners are fully present and engaged, fellatio can be an incredibly powerful and fulfilling experience.
Okay. So we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive,
Yeah.
from anatomy and techniques to the importance of communication and mindfulness.
We've explored both the male and female perspectives and highlighted the importance of finding a balance that works for both partners.
But before we wrap up, there's one more question I want to touch on.
Okay.
It's something that came up in Josh's guide,
Okay.
and it's a bit of a controversial topic.
I'm intrigued. What is it?
Well, he talks about using fellatio as a tool to get what you want in a relationship.
Oh.
Like it's some kind of bargaining chip,
That's a slippery slope, to say the least.
right? Because it kind of goes against everything we've been talking about.
It does.
Consent, mutual respect, and genuine desire.
Exactly. Using sex as a weapon or a form of manipulation is never healthy.
Right.
It creates a power imbalance and can lead to resentment and distrust in the relationship.
So how do we avoid falling into that trap?
It comes back to communication. Being open and honest about your needs and desires, both inside and outside the bedroom, is crucial.
Okay.
If you're feeling unhappy or unfulfilled in your relationship, it's important to address those issues directly rather than resorting to manipulative tactics.
So basically, talk it out instead of using sex as a weapon.
Exactly. Healthy relationships are built on trust, respect, and open communication.
Okay. That's a great message to end on.
Yeah.
So to recap, fellatio can be an incredibly pleasurable and intimate experience for both partners
It can.
when it's approached with the right mindset.
It's about understanding the anatomy, exploring different techniques, and most importantly, communicating openly and honestly with your partner.
And it's about remembering that pleasure is not a zero-sum game.
Right.
When both partners are actively engaged and enthusiastic, everyone benefits.
Indeed, it's about creating a sexual dynamic that's fulfilling, respectful, and above all, enjoyable for everyone involved.
Well said.
Thank you.
You've given us a lot to think about.
It's been a pleasure.
Any final thoughts for our listener before we wrap things up?
Yeah, it really has been quite a journey exploring this topic.
It has.
We started with Josh's rather direct approach in How to Suck Him, and have hopefully expanded on those ideas to give you a more well-rounded understanding.
Yeah, it's interesting how even a single source deep dive like this
Right.
can open up so many avenues for discussion.
Absolutely, and that's the beauty of these deep dives, right?
Right.
We take what you give us
Yeah.
and explore all the angles,
Yeah,
encouraging you to think critically and draw your own conclusions.
exactly. So to wrap things up,
Okay.
what would you say are the key takeaways for our listeners?
Well, I think it all boils down to,
They're-
but fellatio can be an incredibly powerful and intimate experience
Yeah.
when it's approached with intention and mutual respect.
Okay.
It's not just about the physical mechanics,
Right.
but also about the emotional connection, the communication,
Yeah.
and the shared desire to create a pleasurable experience for both partners.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah,
It's about so much more than just the act itself.
it is.
It's about intimacy, exploration, and really understanding what makes both you and your partner tick.
Right, and it's about recognizing that pleasure is not a finite resource.
Right.
When both partners are actively engaged and enthusiastic, everyone wins.
So true, and I think that's a great note to end on.
I agree.
Any final thoughts for our listener before we sign off?
Just this, Josh's guide provided a starting point,
Okay.
but ultimately, the most fulfilling experiences come from creating your own playbook.
Yeah.
Experiment, communicate, and don't be afraid to rewrite the rules.
That's fantastic advice.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining me on this deep dive.
It's been my pleasure.
Until next time, happy exploring, everyone.